again, it's Yogamas day 15, and today I'll be taking you through another series of post breakdowns and modifications. So today I'm going to talk about standing postures, and as you can imagine there are way too many of them to tackle all of them. So what I've done is picked out some of the ones that pop up in almost every flow, and those I think will help you go on and modify on your own. So let's get started, shall we? So first of all, we are going to be dealing with something that I have already tackled in a previous video, namely I think day 1. Basically in the Warrior 1, no, in the Sun Salutation A sequence. So what I'm talking about is forward folds, and by that I mean basically in a Sun Salutation it's this one, so with your palms on the floor and your legs more or less straight. Now today I'm going to talk about some of the other forward folds you will and probably have already encountered in doing yoga. So let's start with a ragdoll fold. A ragdoll fold usually is set up with your legs about hip width apart, then you bend into your knees, and that's the most important thing about a ragdoll fold. You want to have a real nice bend in your knees, because contrary to other forward folds, in a ragdoll the aim is not to have your legs straight or your back necessarily straight, but to have your belly glued to your thighs, and that only works if you have a generous bend in your knees usually. So what I mean by that is when you fall forwards, you want to have the connection here and you want to hold it. And for a lot of people this means having to go really deep into a knee bend. So wherever you feel comfortable and wherever you can make sure that your belly and your thighs stay connected, that's where you want to be. Now the next step usually is to cross your arms and hold on to opposite elbows and just let it all hang out. Now a ragdoll fold, as the name suggests, basically is hanging out. And you can sway here, you can find stillness. That's the basic ragdoll. Now if and when you need to modify, there are quite a number of ways. So first of all, if holding on to opposite elbows doesn't feel good for you, and personally I don't really enjoy it either, so then you can have your hands loosely on the floor. So I like to turn my palms up so as not to push into them, but like have them lie on the floor rather. But you can also go here or whatever else feels good for you. If you can't go down as far, there's always again the option of being here. And again, please try and have this connection here. I mean, if you can't hold it all of the time, that's fine, but just try it. And if you are not as flexible in your hips, then you can have this connection. Then you could, for example, use a block and just put it here, and this achieves the same thing. Another way of modifying this would probably be using a chair and just come here. This would usually mean that you lose the connection, but if that's all you can do, then that's just fine as well. So basically you don't really need to have this connection if you for whatever reason can't. Just do what you can and everyone will be happy, right? So that's for the ragdoll fold. Now there's other forward folds that you may encounter, and one of the most typical ones is the one where you bind around your toes. which means wrapping your peace fingers around your big toe. And in a forward fold, this would look like this. Now, again, you have your feet approximately hip width apart. You wrap your fingers around your big toe, and then you draw yourself down. A couple of things. So what you don't want to be doing is shrug your shoulders up to your ears when you pull down. And you also don't want to pull yourself into a position that you just can't go. Just because you have the leverage doesn't mean you should use it at all costs. So I would rather have you stay up here and take care of your hamstrings than be down here if your hamstrings can't handle that. That said, there is the possibility, of course, that you can't physically wrap your fingers around your toes because you can't bend over that much. And here, for example, is a good time to have a yoga strap. Now, if you don't have a yoga strap, a belt, I don't know, the rope, the belt of a rope, or whatever you can find basically that has something like this of a shape. But also you could probably use a leggings or even a t-shirt if it's sturdy enough. So whatever it is, you hold on to the ends of your makeshift or real strap. You wrap it around your feet and then use it to draw yourself down. What you want to be doing is to have your elbows not flare out too far. You should aim for having them point towards the back, but if you can't, then having them go out a bit is just as fine. So this would be a modification if you can't physically reach your toes. If you don't have a strap, if that's not accessible to you, you can always just forgo the whole wrapping your fingers around your toes thing and just go for a regular forward fold instead. Same goes for the next variation of a forward fold, which is sliding your hands underneath your feet. And that's done with your palms facing upwards so that your toes are basically massaging the insides of your wrists. Now this is a really nice balancing challenge. It can be really uncomfortable at first, so don't worry about it if this doesn't feel right, particularly in your wrists and your hands. You get used to it. Now again, if you can't do that, you can improvise with the strap, or you can use the blocks to modify. For all of these forward folds, the same principle applies as to a regular forward fold, namely the further you bend into your knees, the easier it is to reach the floor. So if you can't have your legs straight, don't worry about it, just come into a bend. Again, make your life easier by bringing the floor up, be it with blocks or a book or even a chair. And that's the basic forward fold. Now the next thing I want to be dealing with is a wide-legged forward fold. By this I mean the one where you stand like this, like have your feet in a triangle position basically, and then you usually inhale up and bend at your hip, either coming down here or coming to grab your toes again, or bind around your ankles. You can have your hands here, you can have your hands out in front of yourself. There's a ton of variations. Now, as you can imagine, one of the easiest way of modifying this posture is by using blocks, because it's very much easier to reach the floor if the floor is higher up. Another way, if you don't have any blocks accessible, is to just bend into your knees until you come down here. This also helps if you have trouble transitioning from a forward fold into a tripod headstand, because you just can't get your head down onto the floor, as I can't today. Then you can just bend into your knees a bit and come here. Yeah, basically that's the two most obvious ways of doing it. You could also, again, use a chair and just come here, or turn it and come here if that's better for you. Now, this is for the wide-legged forward fold. The next thing is a posture you usually only really encounter in an Ashtanga or a rocket class, and that's the half-bound standing lotus forward fold. And I can't do it, so I will just show you basically a modified version of the full version, but a half lotus usually works by having your foot at the crease of your hip, and because it is a bound version, you would bind around your back. Now, this is what I can't do, and that brings me to the first modification. One modification would be to hold your foot up here and bind onto your arm like this. So that's bound, it's just not traditionally bound. Now, from here you would inhale up, and then, whoops, don't fall over, but forward fold. Now this is tricky, as you can imagine. So one way of doing it would be to still hold on to your feet, your foot, and bend forward and hold on to the floor if you can reach it for stability. Another version of modifying would be to not have the half lotus, but go into a tree pose instead and just stay here for a while. And if you want to fold forward, you could also have your leg further down and come here, for example. Now, as you can imagine, all of this requires a lot of stability in your standing foot. So what you can also be doing is have a wall for support and hold on to it while you bend down. You can obviously use a block or something to bring the floor closer. You could use your chair, again, hold on to it for stability. Or you can use it if you're going for the at least semi-bound version. You can use the chair as a means of bending forward, but not bending too much forward. So, yeah, as I said, this is not necessarily a posture you would usually encounter in a, for example, vinyasa flow, but just for the sake of completion in an Ashtanga class, you would very likely have to deal with it. Now the next thing, and I'm sorry I'm looking down at my cheat sheet today because there is a lot of postures and yeah, I tend to forget some. So the next thing is tree pose. Now, I've already shown you, tree pose is basically having your leg up on your inner upper thigh. Now, you can stay here you can, and I'm wobbly today, have your arms up. You can even start to move around a bit. And if you're really feeling balanced, then you can have your eyes closed. So that's a real balancing challenge. Now I know that not everyone can have their feet as high up their thighs, so you can have them further down. Please try and make sure to not press them directly against your knee. I mean, you probably won't because it hurts, so yeah. But even if you try and it doesn't hurt, just don't do it, because in the long run it will start to hurt. Now another way, if you only have this range of motion, then having your leg down there is just fine. And if you're having the trouble with the balancing aspect of it all, then just have your leg on the floor. So go on your tiptoes and just have your heel a bit over your ankle. And that's also a tree. Now, as you can imagine, a chair or a wall is really helpful in this case, because you can just hold on to it and go into a half arm tree pose. And particularly if you're using the wall, you can have your arm nice and high up and can play with letting go for a second or two until you find your balance. So there is that. Also, again, you can make use of the strap. You could have it wrapped around here, hold on to whatever the wall and pull your leg up that way. Yeah. If that feels good for you and if that's what you need, then try it out. I personally find it easier to help my leg up like this, for example, and then have it, manually put it here. Okay. Great. The next posture I want to tackle is the what is it? Extended arm to big toe posture. I think that's the right way of putting it. I don't know exactly. Anyway, thing is, you will see why it is called like that or something similar in a moment, because basically this is this posture. So extended arm, big toe, that's the name. Yeah, as you can see, it's another balancing posture. It requires quite a lot of flexibility in your hamstring, and it may not be for everyone. Good. Now, first things first, if you can't reach your toe, again, use a strap or a belt. That's obvious. If you do not have a strap, if you don't want to deal with it, if you have a injury on your hamstring, then a good option to modify would be to just hold on to your knee instead, because this way you can also go into the next posture, which I will be talking about in a second. If it's the balance you're having trouble with, then obviously a chair can be helpful, the wall can be helpful. Yeah, and that's basically, you could even go so far as to just lean against the wall if you want to. Now, the next thing, if you, in whichever way you manage to have your leg up here, then the next posture usually is having the leg, go out and look over the other shoulder. And as you can see, I'm cheating, I have my leg up the wall at the moment. So that's the easiest way, and it's an option. If you can do it, then that's, I won't judge you, obviously. Now, again, One way of doing it would be to have your leg up here and just turn it out. And as you can see, you don't have to have your leg up, I don't know, about above your head. It's just fine if it's down here. You can obviously also do it while holding on to something. And what's most important, if you have gone for the knee version, then you just open up your hips. So this is the easiest way of doing a modified version of this pose. And I would highly suggest you doing that. Yeah. Then, okay, the next one is something that crops up in vinyasa flows now and again, and you may be already familiar with it, and that's the half moon pose. Now, this again is a very wobbly pose. Let's see. I would suggest, if you have never done it before, always on your first try use some prop. So a block, a water bottle, although I would argue for a block for stability. Now you have your block obviously in the hand that's going to go to the floor. That's the same hand as the leg you're standing on. Now if you remember a warrior 3, that's basically at first the shape we're aiming for. So we're tilting forwards until our hand is on the floor, and then for a half moon we twist open, and that's the hard part. That's the really hard part, because you shift your center of gravity basically, and not having that block there means that you need to go really deep. And this is quite complicated. Now, a version that's even easier than having a block is being here on your chair. And if the balancing part is your biggest problem, then you can do it next to a wall and basically lean up against the wall. That works just fine. It also helps to build the strength needed in your upper body to hold yourself upright. So I like using a wall if you have it handy. What else? Oh yeah, now that we are in a kind of warrior 3 half moon position, the next thing would be a flying splits. Now flying splits, as the name suggests, and you will see in a moment, I can't go into full splits, so my standing splits aren't full either. But basically what you're doing is coming down and attempting to have your legs split. Now you can again use the same hand as the foot you are balancing on to hold on to your ankle and to draw yourself further in. As you can imagine, this again is a very wobbly posture and not super accessible to a lot of people. Now, one of the easiest way of modifying it is again by having, well, usually you would probably need 2 blocks to get the floor a bit closer. And this brings me to my next point. If your back leg can only come here, and if you end up in a whatever balancing somewhere like warrior 3 position, then that's your standing split today, and that's just fine. Now, if you can, try and tilt your upper body a little lower and see if this helps. But if you come here, then that's just perfectly alright. And this brings us to the point where I tell you how to use the chair, because I think in terms of modifying a standing split, the chair could be the most helpful to progress. So you start by holding on to the highest setting and come here. Now over time, as you get a little bit more flexible, you may want to have your hands on the seat and come here, and then you could progress to coming onto your forearms, and even if the chair allows for it, to come, for example, down here. And that would be a really nice way of progressing your standing splits. And yeah, this means we are at our last posture for today, and this is Malasana. And I know I have kind of glossed over it a couple of times ago, videos ago, if you want. Malasana is basically this one, where you have your legs a little bit wider than hip width apart, your toes are turned out, and then you just sink down into a squat. Now I say just because for me this is a really comfortable position. For many people it is not. So basically, first of all, what you're aiming for is having your elbows inside of your knees so that you can push against your knees and help to open up your hips here. You can rock back and forth. You can use it to pike up your hips for a little bit of mobility drills, but mostly Malasana is a way of squatting. Now, again, for very many people, this is really not as comfortable as it is for me, who is used to it. There's a couple of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, I think, is that people tend to not be able to have their heels down. So if you're here, that's on the one hand perfectly fine. On the other hand, it makes it way harder because you have to actively hold your balance a lot more than if you're standing on your whole foot, and you have to engage all of your leg and bum muscles a lot more. So this is hard, and I get it. Now, if you are a person like this, or if you cannot come lower than, for example, here without your muscles really screaming at you, then you may want to grab some blocks and make yourself a little more comfortable here. So this is a Malasana squat as well. Same goes if you, for example, use a cushion or even a chair, although I would argue that this one might be too high if you're really aiming for that hip stretch. Now you could obviously use this chair, but it would be more of a seated hip opener than a real squat. Now, you could also use the chair for balance and come down here. Think like a little bit of belly dancing. You could also make use of a wall if the thing is either balance or not being able to come much further down than this. Then you could have a wall sit, which is not super nice to your quad muscles, but it serves the purpose, I think. And you can also take a cushion like this and maybe make yourself a little bit more comfortable in a way. So yeah, I would say that's all there is to Malasana modifications. At least that's all that pops to mind at the moment. And yeah, I hope there is something in this video you can use for your future yoga classes, and yeah, just let me know if you found it helpful or if I have missed some really obvious modification. Okay? Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.